welcome back to our podcast.
System.
There's proper testing, and so we're going to get official recording and such.
Isn't it just about sitting in a classroom?
So all of those self-taught skills and group 5
Learning skill.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our podcast. We are from Group 5. I am your host, Andi Widya Maulidya, and today we're gonna talk about law. Yes, you heard that right. We're going to talk about law. It's such a fun topic. Yeah, whatever. And now, before you roll your eyes and scroll away, just hear me out. This isn't gonna be a boring law lecture because we're gonna talk about something that touches every single student, every single parent, teacher, or even you, all of you guys who took online courses at home. And that is the Indonesian National Education System Law, or Undang-Undang Sisdiknas tahun 2003. Joining me today is a very special guest, Kak Inayah Kamila. She's going to help us understand this law, whatever works and what doesn't, and what's super interesting about it. Please welcome.
Okay, so thank you for having me. I'm excited to talk about this because Undang-Undang Sisdiknas is often misunderstood, but it really shapes education in India.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. So, as I've said before, we're not gonna make this boring, we promise, but also we will still make it deep enough that all of you guys, listeners, will actually learn something. I really love this. So, first things first, Kaya.
Yeah.
Let's start super simple. If you had to explain Undang-Undang Nas to, let's just say, a high schooler, a high school student, in just one sentence, what would you say?
Um, in one sentence, okay, I'd say Undang-Undang Sisdiknas is the backbone of Indonesian education system, regulating all forms of learning, formal, non-formal, and informal, and ensuring they can be recognized if needed.
Break it down so that it doesn't sound boring like rocket science. Okay, let's start with the basics. Undang-Undang Sisdiknas, they talk about three types of education. Kak Inaya, could you please walk us through them?
Oh, sure. So first is formal education. That's like school, university, anything with a structured curriculum. Maybe in Indonesia now we just use curriculum Merdeka. It's kind of like free curriculum like in English. Curriculum Merdeka, right? Mm, and before we use K13, right? And second, it's non-formal education like courses, training, programs, workshops. Yeah, it's the non-formal education courses. And the third is informal education, like learning from family, community, life experience. Like you can also in social media, it also can be the community of you all.
Hey, that's interesting. So formal is clear, guys. Non-formal is like those skill building courses that people take outside of schools. I think it also included extracurricular. Yeah. Formal is life lessons that you can learn everywhere. Either it's based on your experience or family or anything, such as learning to cook from your grandma or learning coding from YouTube tutorials. And here's the really cool part. The law says that every, even non-formal and informal learning can be recognized if there's proper testing and accreditation. So, Kak Inaya, if I took a coding bootcamp or learn graphic design online, can I get official recognition? What do you think?
Yes. What? Yes, that's the idea. The law allows people to get their skills officially recognized, even if they didn't go through traditional school. Of course, there are accreditation process to make sure the learning meets standards, but it's a way to open paths for people outside the traditional system.
Wow, pretty awesome. So all of those self-taught skills and online courses might actually count officially. That's amazing. Listeners, please don't tell anyone, but I might start bragging about my online courses now, especially French courses. Okay, another thing that I like about Undang-Undang Sisdiknas is that it really tries to cover all learners. Mind my words, tries, and not just students sitting in classroom. It's like saying, "Hey, you're learning outside school. They matter too."
Ah, exactly. It's an important step in recognizing that education isn't just about sitting in a classroom. I think when you get education, it's not just you sitting in a classroom, but how your experience. It's about learning skills and personal growth in many forms, like a character, right? It's include when you get education. I think education is all about the textbook or anything else. I think the education it's also about how your character, how your attitude, your behavior. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because as we know, school is uh, school is built based on people who want to teach their kids character. People want to form their character. That's one of the main purpose of school, right? I love that. Okay. Let's move on to the juicy parts. The article that always get people talking. First up, pasal 49. Pasal 49 about the 20% schools. Kak Inaya, what is this about? What do you think?
Okay, so I think not let me see. That like I read Pasal 49 indicates that government spends at least 20% of both the national and local budgets on education. The idea is to ensure schools have enough resources to function properly.
10. That sounds like a lot, but as I have heard, in practice, in reality, many schools, especially in the 3T regions, tertinggal, terluar, terdepan, they don't really feel that money. Like, how does that happen?
Yeah, exactly. While the law sets the target, in reality, funds might be delayed, mismanaged, or constructed in urban areas. Schools in remote regions often still lack basic facilities like textbook or even enough teacher. Ya, pasti di setiap sesuatu itu ada tertundanya. Terutama di inti regions itu ya, inti regions apa ya? Tertinggal, terluar dan terdepan. Kadang ada apa ya? Ada yang tidak disentuh. Kadang ada daerah-daerah yang tidak tersentuh dari money. But I think ketika mereka tidak tersentuh itu bukan hanya sekedar karena dana, but the people who manage the budgets, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about money, guys, but also people who contributed in progress. So basically, it's like telling someone, let them eat cake. You can eat a huge cake, but they don't actually get the slice. That's one of the big gaps between law and reality. Next up, Pasal 50. Pasal 50 mengenai RSBI dan SBI schools. There was supposed to be an international standard schools to raise education quality. That kind of sounds amazing, right? What do you think, Kaina?
Yes, the idea was to improve quality by creating schools with international standards, but it turned out to be elitist. Only students from wealthy families could afford it. This went against the principle of equal access. So the constitutional court abolished in 2013. Jadi ya dari kebanyakan ya pendidikan yang berkualitas itu hanya didapatkan dari orang-orang yang memiliki harta berlebih or the wealthy families. Kayak misal ketika kita nggak paham sama apa yang ada di sekolah, pastinya akan ada pendidikan informal yang kayak tadi. Informal itu kayak courses, kayak mereka akan mendapatkan kelas lebih, mereka akan mendapatkan pengetahuan lebih ketika mereka punya biaya untuk membayar hal tersebut. Jadi sebenarnya kalau kita bilang dan kita lihat ya, anak-anak yang punya pendidikan yang bagus itu berasal dari ekonomi yang baik juga. Dan mereka punya akses besar untuk itu. Sebenarnya bukan hanya mengenai pendidikan ya, tapi di luar pendidikan, semisal kayak pekerjaan. Ketika mereka sudah punya punya financial freedom atau bisa dibilang mereka wealthy, pasti mereka selalu akan mendapatkan tempat. I think that's
because whether the intention is whether how kind the intention was, in reality it doesn't always match the expectations. I mean, high standards are great, but if only some people, jika hanya beberapa orang yang bisa mengakses pendidikan itu, it only creates more inequality because that's kind of hard balance. Now we move on to Pasal 53 regarding educational legal entity. This is kind of interesting because schools apparently can become a badan hukum, like a corporate. Freedom and cons are privatization and education as a business. What do you think, Kainaya?
exactly. It allows schools to operate more independently, but the risk is the education becomes focused on profit rather than quality. Only those who can pay might get the best resources. Mungkin kayak sekolah-sekolah ini, kayak sekolah-sekolah ini ya, ada beberapa lah sarana pendidikan yang mereka tuh lebih mementingkan banyaknya siswa yang masuk, banyaknya mahasiswa yang masuk. Tapi mereka justru dengan mementingkan banyaknya mahasiswa itu, mereka lupa kalau ada hal-hal yang harus diperhitungkan. Seperti fasilitas, mereka cuma kayak menerima siswa dan dana, tapi mereka tidak berpikir bahwa ada fasilitas-fasilitas yang kurang bisa digunakan. Jadi kan fasilitas itu juga bisa bisa menunjang kualitas belajar seseorang, kan? Iya, jadi iya. Kebanyakan juga sih sekolah-sekolah mungkin seperti itu. Mereka menjadikan itu sebagai sebuah sarana bisnis, tapi mereka lupa bahwa yang paling penting itu adalah kualitas dari si siswanya ini, kualitas pendidiknya ini.
If it comes at the cost of equality, then it's a problem. So, listeners, please think about it. If your local school could still technically like a business under this law. Okay, and finally, let's talk about pasal 57 hingga 59 regarding evaluation and standards. The law sets national standards for teachers, students, and schools. But there's a tricky part about this. One size fits all. They don't always work. Right, Kak Inaya?
Yes, of course. Schools in urban areas might meet standards easily, but school in village with limited resources struggle. Evaluation with a support often feel like punishment instead of instead of guidance. Jadi kebanyakan sebenarnya sekolah-sekolah yang di bawah itu mereka kurang support dari pemerintah. Contoh kayak dana atau budget yang sangat susah dikeluarkan, perlu persyaratan inilah, perlu persyaratan itulah. Mereka tidak mendapatkan dukungan dari pemerintah kita sendiri. Nah, sedangkan kan sekolah swasta itu mereka punya financial freedom ya, mereka punya financialnya independently. Mereka nggak perlu untuk mencari dana sana sini. Dan dengan mungkin kurangnya pendidikan anak-anak bangsa, justru banyak guru-guru yang disalahkan. Tapi gimana kita? I ever read one book. Aku pernah baca buku. Buku itu tuh judulnya Mendidik Itu Membahagiakan. It's by dan di situ mereka membahas salah satu sekolah paling terkenal, sekolah Islam paling terkenal di Makassar lah bisa dibilang ya. Kalian mungkin ya, salah satu sekolah Islam terkenal di Makassar itu di mereka pendidikannya bagus, jadi sekolahnya lebih terupgrade karena mereka tuh dipentingkan kesejahteraan guru-gurunya itu dipentingkan. Nah, jadi karena si guru-guru ini sudah terpenuhi kesejahteraannya, akhirnya mereka mendidik dengan bahagia. Nah, that's why buku itu adalah mendidik itu membahagiakan. Even banyak juga sih guru-guru yang pasti bertanya, kenapa jadi guru? Pasti pertanyaannya adalah kenapa jadi guru? Kenapa nggak jadi dokter? Mereka selalu bertanya, kenapa? Why just want be a teacher? Kenapa kalian nggak mau jadi dokter dan sebagainya? Kan? Jadi mereka tuh bukan cuma pemerintah sih, bahkan lingkungan kita the people around us is not super arts gitu. Itulah mungkin yang dirasakan sama evaluation without support. Mereka cuma disalahkan, guru-guru itu cuma bisa bahkan ada yang bilang ya guru-guru itu cuma makan gaji buta. Itu kayak hukuman nggak sih? Daripada mereka membimbing. Bahkan kan yang efisiensi anggaran itu pelatihan dikurangi, pelatihan melalui daring. Jadi kan biasanya orang dapat duit itu dari pelatihan ya. Dan karena pelatihan itu dikurangi, itu malah makin bikin semangat mereka jadi down gitu loh. Selalu dievaluasi. Jadi gimana ya? Kalau bisa dibilang bekerja di dalam negara itu kayak kita bekerja di bawah tekanan sih. Di bawah tekanan.
Great point of view. Like, I really agree with this one because just like Kak Inaya has stated before, evaluation without support often feel like punishment instead of guidance. Because as we all know, some teachers in our country unfortunately don't get the proper training or evaluation. They only do training from online like this maybe when they could get the chance skills in training daring begini. Padahal dengan pelatihan itu dapat juga melatih skill guru dengan mengajarkan siswanya lebih baik, begitu kan?
Iya.
Why the reason we're talking about these articles are so important. It's not just about theory, guys. It affects real students and teachers. Okay, next segment. Let's dive into real life stories. How do these laws usually play out? What do you think, Saida?
I'm sorry, what? Can you repeat it?
How do these laws play out?
Okay.
The law.
Okay. Thank you. Well, RSBI schools ended up excluding middle and lower class students. Three areas often don't receive. Mereka seringnya tidak menerima the full benefits of the 20%. Gimana ya? 20% tapi mereka tidak mendapatkan the full of benefits. Bahkan ya, gimana? Even 20% itu mereka cuma mendapatkan sebagian kecilnya. And regarding the teacher quality, iya, itu sangat-sangat mempengaruhi kualitas seorang guru. Apa ya? Benefits itu mempengaruhi bukan cuma seorang guru ya, not just the teachers, but maybe other professions. Needs apa ya? Mereka needs benefits. Kita mungkin bukan cuma seorang guru ya, kita juga sebagai manusia biasa ini yang belum mungkin menjadi apa-apa ini, pasti kita tetap mencari yang namanya benefits. Apalagi ini cuma 20%. Kan ada 100% ya. Cuma 20% itu kita mendapatkan benefits-nya, lagi ndak full juga. Jadi ya, and regarding teacher quality, responsibilities overlap between central and local governments, leaving gaps in accountability. Ya, mereka punya gap yang lumayan besar dalam accountability-nya, dalam perhitungannya.
Yes. So maybe, as we can see, a student in remote village might not get all the facilities that students in big towns get. Like they might not have textbook, might not have qualified teacher, and even though the laws say they should, it doesn't really apply. It's such a huge mismatch. And now, thinking about the remote islands, the law guarantees funding and standards, but getting trained teachers there is kind of tough. It's not just about the rules, it's also about the logistics.
Exactly. The law provides the framework, but implementation is the real challenge. Mungkin ada hukumnya, ada teksnya, tapi yang paling susah itu adalah implementasinya. Sama dengan apa ya? Mungkin kalau dibilang kata-kata, kita bisa ngomong itu gampang. Kita bisa cari riset dari berbagai sumber, tapi yang susah dan paling challenging itu adalah gimana cara mengimplementasikannya.
Terlibat atau mungkin ada keterhalangan atau bagaimana gitu ya. Next, have questions over here. If you could revise one of the articles today, salah satu pasalnya, which one would it be and why?
I think I will focus on pasal 49 to ensure the budget really reaches school that need it. Ya, benar aja. Bukan cuma dalam sekolah atau pendidikan, tapi semuanya butuh budget, really need budget. Or pasal 53 to prevent commercialization and maintain fair access for all students.
So Kak Inaya is basically team budget and team fairness, which is actually makes sense and kind of matches because budget, we cannot lie, budget is very important, guys, and it should be allocated correctly and properly too. And because of some problems that our country may have, the fairness here isn't really a thing because there are some schools in villages in the 3T areas that still couldn't get the same treatment or even the same equality that students in Jakarta or big cities got. And access are really the backbone of equality education. And it's not just about numbers, guys. Budget is teachers, classrooms, books, and programs. And keeping schools from turning into profit driven businesses ensures fairness. And now, wrap this up. Here are the 3 practical recommendations from Kak Inaya based on what we've talked about today. Number 1, make this because bagaimana cara pemerintah ingin ingin mendapatkan keyakinan dari rakyat dalam mengalokasikan dana yang sudah diatur undang seperti also keep the national standards fair, adaptable to local conditions. Ingin memiliki sekolah yang berstandar internasional itu baik, it's okay, but also we need to make sure that every could get the same education, could get the same state in the same standard. Because if it's only for wealthy people, why bother? Why bother making it in the first place? And also support teachers, training, welfare, and not just evaluations. Because if you keep evaluating teachers without even training them, without even properly teaching them how the proper way to get to your students' heart, the proper way to teach them dearly and just so heartfully, they no matter how good, no matter how smart the teacher is, no matter how high their education, it won't be enough, guys. I love that. Simple, practical, and really actionable. It shows that while the laws might seem stiff, they truly affect whether every kid gets the same treatment. Okay, now we move on to question and answer session. Anyone in the audience have any questions?
Dulu nih.
Okay, Ida, you wanna go first?
Ya, jadi mendengar pembicaraan Widya sama Kak Inaya, aku ada satu pertanyaan. Gimana itu? Bagaimana cara guru menghadapi standar nasional yang kadang tidak sesuai dengan kondisi sekolah di desa? Terima kasih.
Okay, that's such a nice question. Do you have any thoughts, Kak Inaya?
Okay, I think I have to answer it. Oke, jadi standar nasional ya. Tadi pertanyaannya tentang standar nasional kan. Bagaimana cara guru menghadapi standar nasional, sedangkan kondisi di setiap tempat itu it's different, berbeda-beda. Menurut aku sih sebagai apa ya, ada sedikit pengalaman dalam pembelajaran ya, dalam sedikit pembelajaran. Kayak misal ketika aku ngajar anak-anak yang sekolahnya lebih bagus dibanding anak-anak yang apa ya, bisa dibilang sekolahnya itu terbelakang. Menurut aku kita harus punya banyak ide sih untuk standar itu. Karena gini loh, kita misalkan bukan berasal dari sekolah yang high quality, sedangkan kita harus ngajarin anak-anak yang dari sekolah-sekolah yang sekarang sekolah-sekolah yang high quality. Itu pasti susah. Dan kemudian habis itu kita harus ngajarin anak-anak yang gimana ya? Anak-anak yang dibilang di bawah banget bisa dibilang. Itu juga susah. Jadi menurut aku itu adalah bagaimana guru itu memiliki ide-ide dari mungkin dari membaca. Jadi memang guru itu harus selalu dan banyak belajar. Guru itu tidak pernah berhenti belajar, teman-teman. Jadi kalau bisa dibilang pekerjaan yang paling bagus itu guru, karena dia tidak akan pernah berhenti belajar. Entah itu mereka tidak akan pernah berhenti belajar dan mengajar. Caranya adalah dengan banyak membaca, dengan banyak literasi. Kan dari banyak literasi itu apapun bisa jadi referensi, teman-teman. Ketika kita nonton atau scroll TikTok, misal oh iya lagu ini bagus nih, lagi hype sekarang. Jadi standarnya itu kita bisa break the standard. Menurut aku sih kita bisa break the standard dengan banyak membaca, dengan banyak literasi, dengan banyak referensi. Iya guys, even kalau misalnya aku mau masuk ke kelas esok hari, aku pasti banyak-banyak scroll tentang media pembelajaran, tentang or anything else, games atau apapun. Aku selalu upgrade. Did you get the point? I think that's all.
Great from Kak. Guru juga sekolah ya, because as we know, one size fits all, it doesn't always work, and tidak bisa kita pukul rata ya semua standar yang ada di Indonesia ini. Jadi tantangan bagi para guru adalah agar mereka bisa berinovasi sekreatif mungkin agar bisa break the standard like break the standard. That's very
Iya.
Are you satisfied with the answer? If you want more, please.
Kalau misalkan ada, maaf ya aku tambahin. Kalau misalnya ada pertanyaan lebih nggak apa-apa, ditanyain aja lagi. Kalau misalnya you don't get my point, you can ask me anything else.
Yes. Don't ask. So, what do you think, Fida?
Oke, terima kasih sudah memaparkan pertanyaan saya. Saya sudah paham.
Okay. Great. Thank you for your smart question. That's such a good question. Now, Rifki, do you have any question?
Boleh. Dari pertanyaannya Vida tadi, saya terlintas satu pertanyaan. Ini untuk opini kita semua ini. Bayangkan kita punya kekuasaan di negara ini. Di samping standar nasional itu seharusnya harus dipukul rata. Apa yang akan kalian lakukan misalnya? Karena semua itu bukan bergantung sama fasilitas toh. Bagaimana Anda untuk memecah kualitas guru agar bisa menyebar ke pelosok-pelosok begitu? Karena saya pribadi, saya pernah mendapatkan guru yang kayak kurang berkompeten seperti itu. Mungkin ada beberapa juga yang seperti itu. Bagaimana menurut kalian?
Okay, may I answer?
Yes, please.
Jadi caranya adalah gini lah. Seperti yang kita tahu ya, kalau sekarang itu ada yang namanya PPG. Terus kemarin juga sempat ada yang namanya GGD. Nah, di mana dan ada juga seleksi ASN, di mana ini seleksinya butuh seleksi yang ketat. Itu gimana, dan dari seleksi itu terjadilah si pembagian ini. Ya, dari seleksi itu terjadilah si pembagian ini, guys. Dan seleksinya itu bukan hanya soal tulisan, tapi juga soal karakter dan kepribadian. Itu menurut saya salah satu cara untuk memecah kualitas guru. Ya benar sekali yang dibilang sama Rifki tadi, bahwa benar banget yang dibilang sama Rifki tadi, kalau kita sering menemukan guru-guru yang bisa dibilang low quality. Jadi pasti ada yang luput. Dan guru-guru itu ketika saya itu sangat berbeda guys ya, ketika saya masuk ke dunia kuliah dengan saya duduk di bangku sekolah. Saya merasakan apa yang Rifki bilang tadi. Ketika saya masuk di bangku kuliah, saya terkaget. Oh, ternyata gini ya caranya orang mengajar itu. Ternyata kualitas standarnya seorang guru itu harusnya seperti ini. Bukan seperti apa yang saya dapatkan ketika saya masih di bangku sekolah dasar. Jadi dengan cara menseleksi. Seleksi bukan hanya tentang otak, kepintaran, tapi tentang kepribadian. Dan itu semua disesuaikan dengan setiap daerah. Mungkin saya setuju dengan seleksi ASN ya, walaupun mungkin ya, ini masih kemungkinan adalah pasti kecurangan di dalam seleksi itu. Dan mungkin itu yang luput dari pemerintah. I think that's maybe you get my point.
Okay, thank you
Yes,
very
Kak.
much.
Bagaimana kalau Widya?
My answer is overall the same with Kainaya, because that's also one of the function of ASN, karena tes ASN itu kan basically mereka menyaring guru ya, sifatnya guru ini, bagaimana kira-kira apa teknik mengajarnya guru ini itu jika ditempatkan di kondisi bagaimana ya, pendidikan yang agak di bawah standar begitu. Dan kalau memang dipaksakan dengan standar yang sama, itu tidak adil untuk sekolah-sekolah di pelosok. Makanya diadakanlah sistem tes ASN ini yang juga harus ada penyesuaiannya untuk setiap daerah yang beda-beda kondisi tentu saja. Thank you very much, Rifki. What do you think about our answers, especially for Kak Inaya? What do you think about Kak Inaya's answer?
Ya, menurut saya itu sudah cukup karena overall itu sudah bagus jawabannya.
Okay, thank you very much, guys, for participating tonight. And all right, that's a wrap up for our question today. Huge thanks to Kak Inaya Camila, for sharing such insightful answers and helping us understand the challenges and realities of education in Indonesia. And I really hope our listener got some useful takeaways. Thank you very much, guys. And I'm Andi Widya Moidia, your host, closing the mic for today. But keep your brain on, because learning never stops. See you later.